Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Southeast Termite and Pest Control. Spring is right around the corner, and that means it's time to start thinking about carpenter bees, termites, and brand new mosquito treatment that they have at Southeast Termite and Pest Control as well. It's terrific. It's tough on mosquitoes, but easier on all the creatures in your yard, the other insects, the good insects. It's a new thing to try. It's really good. I've used their stuff for years, believe in these guys wholeheartedly. It's a good family-owned, locally owned. You hear me say that all day because that's the kind of companies we want on this show. And this is a company that's been here for a lot of years, and I've used them for a lot of years myself. Trust me, you can trust them. Southeast Termite and Pest Control. All right. Mark, I had my car worked on this week. And whenever you go in and talk to a mechanic's going to start talking about sports with me. And usually it's, hey, what do you think about this? And I will say, well, and then they'll go into their thoughts and tell you what they think. This guy had an interesting question. We were talking about Tennessee's offense and why some of these guys aren't, they don't look comfortable shooting at times. They don't shoot well at times. I said, well, look, I think that there's a little bit of looking over your shoulder that these guys do because Rick Barnes clearly will yank them if you give up at a layup. If you screw up a defensive assignment, he'll bench you. Josiah Jordan-James said it earlier this year. And he threw out the question, I wonder if Chris Lofton would have survived in this, because Lofton wasn't known as an ace defender. Would Rick Barnes have left a guy on the court knowing, ooh, I'll take his 30 points even if he's given up 20? I thought, that's a great question. I'm going to pass that on to Mark Pankratz, who coached Chris Lofton. Would Chris Lofton have thrived in the Rick Barnes system?
Well, I think first, if you think of Coach Pearl, you don't think of him as the defensive guy, but you do think of him more as especially in his early years, of an X's and O's guy, would put Chris in certain ball screen situations to be able to use his offensive ability. He had a green light. Bad shots were okay. And then you think about Barnes not doing that and then being a defensive guy. I actually think Chris would have been as good, if not better, under Barnes.
Interesting.
The reason I think that is, one, Coach Pearl didn't work a ton on individual development. Chris was just internally going to work really hard, and he did a lot of extra work. You look at the way that Barnes players have developed in their tenure here from an offensive skill set, I think Chris would have been even a better offensive player. Defensively, I mean, that's just what he emphasized. I mean, you look at Tyreek Key. Tyreek Key's not a great defender, right. But he plays a bunch, and not without the offensive ability. So. And then you look at what he did with guys like Kevin Durant. Yes, Kevin Durant was a top 10. Yeah, but also, Kevin Durant was a top 10 in defensive of the year voting in the NBA 3 times. And, so Barnes showed to get guys better defensively. So long answer to your short question of, I do think that Chris Lofton would have been as good, if not better, in this offense.
That's terrific. I'm so glad I asked that question. I thank the folks who were changing my oil who threw that at me. That was a good one. Now let me ask you about this week that's coming up. You've got Arkansas, then you got the road trip to Auburn. Auburn's going to be frothing after they lost a close one up here on what they viewed as a bad call. It was a great call from a Tennessee perspective, bad call from an Auburn perspective. Funny how it works that way in your home court. Is Tennessee ready for Arkansas and Auburn this week?
Well, I think the big thing will be, how does Josiah recover from playing last night? Is he healthy again? Then I also look at Meshach's continued offensive improvement, because you look at what he did against Alabama and the way that he defended at a high level against Miller. Nick Smith is just as good with Arkansas. He is their go-to guy. Meshach's going to have another big-time performance on defense there. And then I always have concern about, how do you manage the locker room with guys coming in and out of being healthy, not healthy. So if Julian comes back and now you've got Meshach playing better and B.J. Edwards getting some minutes, how do they handle that? And then Auburn, that's going to be a tough one. I think if you can split this week, you're going to Auburn. I think Auburn is, if they lose earlier in the week, could potentially be playing for NCAA tournament lives, because they've not had a good non-conference schedule. That's going to be a tough one at Auburn to end the regular season. So Arkansas is the big one for me that you got to win.
It's interesting you talk about managing those teams. It's one of the things that if you look at Barnes, and I guess we've talked about this before, if you wanted me to pick a guy to coach one game, I don't know that Barnes would be my guy. If you wanted me to pick someone who could manage a season and do a good job with roster changes, guys in and out, he would be the guy. And I know he's lost 5 of the last 8 this month, but he would be a guy overall since he's been here. You look at what he does, body of work throughout his career. He's a really good regular season coach.
Well,
and where you make a great point, I'm going to lean on trusting him a little bit on terms of getting the minutes back to the right guys. We'll see.
Well, and look what Alabama's dealing with. Number 1 team in the country, but look at what they're dealing with off the court. You know, and you
Yes.
don't have to worry about that with Barnes. You win at a high level, top 10, top 15 program since he's been here consistently after the first couple of years. And you don't have any of that stuff. You got great kids that are doing things the right way.
Yeah, I'm glad we were going to do a whole segment on that, but it would take too long to actually, for the people who aren't aware of what's going on with Alabama, it would take 5 minutes to break it down, then we'd have no time to discuss it. But, you know, that's a school that should be firing its president, its athletic director, and its head coach right now. If I were on the board, they're all gone for stupidity. And it does make you appreciate Rick Barnes and the fact that for those who went to UT, I know the sidewalk alums who don't care a thing about the school and don't get misty-eyed when they hear the alma mater like I do, they don't care. But for folks that went to UT, I think that they appreciate the fact that Rick Barnes runs a program where you don't get up every morning to see who was arrested overnight, what kind of stupid thing he said, what kind of stupid thing a player did. I'm glad you brought that up because, yes, that is a very big plus for Rick Barnes. As much as we nitpick coaching and games, because that's what sports fans and sports shows do, he deserves a lot of credit for running a clean program.
Yeah.
Knock on wood. All
And
right.
thank you for not firing me when I mess up.
You'd have
I
been gone,
appreciate
man.
it.
Gone. I was like, as a matter of fact, the whole situation, the New Year's Day thing, I'm like, you can't get rid of Pearl. What about that bum assistant he's got? Just throw him to the shark. Mark Pancratz, thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. When we come back, we're going to talk about Tony Vitello. He is suspended. It seems an odd thing. How is a man suspended for tampering when everyone's tampering? Let's discuss if he's the new Bruce Pearl, come to think of it. That's next on The Sports Source.